They say nature doesn't care about stories, that it's just survival, instinct, a cycle of eat or be eaten. But I don't know anymore. Not after what I saw on that stretch of dry pastureland out in West Texas, a place where the sun burns everything to bone, and the only things tougher than the land are the creatures that live on it. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays are always quiet on the ranch. We check the fence lines, patch holes, make sure the animals haven't wandered where they shouldn't. Nothing fancy, just routine. I was driving along the south end of Powell Ranch, radio half crackling, coffee lukewarm, mind drifting. Until the call came in. Possible livestock down, mile marker 42, off County Road 12. Something about a snake. I frowned. A snake? Out here? Maybe a rattler spooked a calf. It happens. But a minute later, I pulled my truck to a stop and raised my binoculars. And what I saw nearly made my stomach drop through the floor. About 50 yards out, under the glare of that brutal morning sun, lay our biggest Bull Angus named Boone. He was massive, nearly 2,000 pounds of muscle and horn. But Boone wasn't standing tall like usual. He was pinned to the ground, legs twitching, eyes wide. And wrapped around him, tight as a coiled steel cable, was the biggest snake I'd ever seen in my life. A Burmese python, 20 feet long if it was an inch, thick as a fence post, with skin glinting gold and brown in the sunlight. It had wrapped itself around Boone's body over and over, squeezing tighter with every exhale. Every time Boone let out a breath, the snake took more of him. I radioed for backup fast. Code red. We got a python massively attacking livestock. I repeat, this is not a drill. I didn't know how the hell a python got this far west. Florida, sure. That's where they've been spreading. But here, on my ranch, it felt like something out of a nightmare. The bull was fading fast. I could see his ribs start to shake, his eyes glaze over. Then he moved. It wasn't panic. Not like before. This time, Boone planted his hooves into the dirt. His body strained under the weight, but he shifted slow, deliberate. He was crawling toward the edge of the pasture, toward the big oak tree we'd always used as a windbreak. I whispered under my breath, "Come on, big guy." The python didn't let up. It coiled tighter. You could see the muscle rippling under its scales, squeezing with the kind of pressure that kills slowly. But Boone kept going, dragging the snake with him, inch by inch, until he reached the tree. And then this part still gives me chills. She pressed the snake's head against the rough bark and began rubbing it. At first, I thought it was a death rattle. But no. Boone was grinding the python's skull against the oak. The bark tore at the scales. I watched the snake flinch, its grip loosen. Boone leaned harder, twisting his massive shoulders, using the tree like a tool. 10 full minutes of this. 10. Until the python finally uncoiled, too dazed or hurt to fight. It slithered off into the tall grass, and Boone, barely standing, chest heaving, just stared after it. That should have been the end. Predator meets prey, prey wins, end of story. But Boone didn't leave. Even when backup arrived, when we surrounded the pasture and tried to approach, Boone stayed by that tree, his eyes fixed on the tall grass where the python had crawled. We spotted it a few minutes later, curled up, bleeding from its head. It wasn't moving much, and Boone walked toward it. Not to finish the job, but slow, calm, curious. He nudged the python with his nose. We froze, half expecting a strike. But the snake didn't react. It just lay there. And somehow, you could tell it knew Boone meant no harm. That's when Dr. Melody Pierce, our wildlife vet, showed up. She saw what we saw and said the one thing no one was prepared for. We need to treat the snake. With Boone's permission, apparently. And I swear, that bull seemed to understand. He watched us the whole time while we cleaned the python's wounds, wrapped its injuries, even gave it fluids. The snake stayed calm like it knew we were trying to help. Boone never left its side. They slept under that oak tree together that night. And the next, and the next. We started calling them Guardian and Coil. Sounded like characters out of some novel. Guardian, the bull who saved his enemy. Coil, the snake who learned not to bite the hand that freed it. 3 days later, everything changed again. I was at the monitoring post with Melody when we saw the trucks. 3 of them, kicking up dust like angry wasps. And I knew the lead vehicle. Jed Crowley. He was an exotic animal trafficker, the kind that thinks laws are just polite suggestions. Word must have spread about the 20-foot python we were sheltering. That thing would fetch tens of thousands on the black market. We got poachers inbound. I radioed. 3 trucks. Arm. Guardian must have heard them before we did. He stood up, full height, chest out, and placed himself between Coil and the oncoming convoy. And I swear to you, he didn't budge. Jed stepped out with a tranquilizer rifle, smirking like the devil himself. Well, looky here. A bull playing bodyguard. Ain't that precious? He raised his rifle. Bonino, Guardian charged. Not wild. Not desperate. Calculated. He drove straight at Jed, forced him to dive behind his truck. The other 2 poachers scrambled, dropped their nets. Guardian wheeled back around, stood guard again. Every time they tried to flank, he moved. Blocking. Hurting. Outthinking. He's using tactics, Melody whispered, stunned. He's not just defending, he's commanding the field. The standoff lasted 20 minutes until law enforcement arrived. Jed and his boys were hauled off in cuffs. Only then did Guardian walk back to Coil. And that snake, barely healed, lifted its head and gently touched the bull's leg. No one said a word. We just watched. Weeks passed. Coil recovered. But that brought a new dilemma. Burmese pythons are invasive. By policy, they're supposed to be removed or euthanized. I'll never forget what Bill Thompson, the ranch owner, said that day. That snake taught my bull something fierce. And that bull taught that snake mercy. Ain't no manual gonna tell me to break up a pair like that. He fenced off 40 acres, registered it as a wildlife sanctuary, built it around the oak tree. And there they stayed, Guardian and Coil, together. Researchers came. Documentaries were made. But what mattered most was what we learned. They weren't just companions. They became partners. They communicated. They defended each other. They shared a routine. 6 months later, a coyote snuck in, started stalking the rabbits we introduced into the ecosystem. Coil signaled Guardian with a movement I can't explain. Guardian responded instantly, positioning to drive the predator out while Coil flanked it. No violence, just cooperation. Like generals who'd seen war and now kept peace. Years passed. Guardian got old. Coil got bigger. But they were always together, under that oak tree. And if you ever ask me if animals can feel, if they can choose, if they can forgive, I'll tell you about that bull who protected a python. And that python who never left his side. And maybe, just maybe, you'll believe me. Because out there on Powell Ranch, beneath a Texas sun, 2 creatures who should have been enemies became something else entirely. A story no one saw coming. A bond no one could explain. But one none of us will ever forget. And now I gotta ask you something. What do you think this story means? What does it say about the lines we draw between species, between friend and enemy, threat and ally? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know where you stand on this. And if this tale moved you even a little, hit that like button, share it with someone who still believes the world has room for miracles, and don't forget to subscribe. Because stories like these, they're not just about animals. They're about us, too. See you next time.